Um, Hi everyone. I hope you all got the message. I sent it out 8 minutes late because I sent it to the wrong class. I teach for St. Martin's University also, and they actually have their Zoom tomorrow. So, hi Brandon. Hi Brandon. So, so I'm just going to assume that you have your mute off, but thanks for the message. I'm going to go ahead and start because I sent my link to the wrong course, so that's why there was a 10 minutes late. So anyway, might as well go ahead. I don't know how many people ever show up, but glad to have you here. We're looking at, let me get the course online here. Let's see.
I've got my mic set up now.
Good. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
We might have some other people pop up, but I'm just going to start anyway.
Okay.
Do you have any questions, first of all, about the assignments, the course? You have a chance to ask now.
No, nothing's coming to mind right now, at least.
Okay, so everything's working pretty well and you understand everything?
Yeah.
And your session 1?
Off the top of my head, I don't even remember. Let me see.
That's who I sent it to, I think. So
Okay, I should be then. Yeah, I would assume.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same course, the 145. So I'm
Okay.
pretty sure I started with you guys. I'm only doing one. I teach 3 courses, so I can't do them like constantly. So I have one for Pierce and one for you guys.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the modules and what we're studying this week. Last week it was the Impressionists. Did you get a chance to? I recorded it to look at the Impressionist one.
I'm pretty sure I looked at everything that was there.
Okay.
Yeah, unless it just got added recently. Let me see the modules.
Just looking, recording. I think it was for. Oh, I see one for the 145 class for week module 2. Let me see.
You said it was the Impressionist stuff?
Yeah, that's what I went over last week.
Okay.
I don't see it. So it's on my desktop. I bet you anything I had trouble loading it. Sometimes it'll freak out because there's not enough space.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay, so we have chapters 14 and 22, which is pretty loaded, as you can tell. 14, I throw these in. Let me look at it. Oh, okay. 14 is architecture. So what I usually do is I try to load different media like drawing, painting, architecture, what do you call printmaking, stuff like that go along with that. Like for instance, this I've got for this week, I've got architecture that is chapter 14. And I also have just photography to look at that this week. It's pretty fascinating because it started, the first images were like 1826, but that was like just the chemistry, like getting an image, and they were doing, it was basically a chemical process.
Sure, yeah.
Later, around this time, people started getting wind of that. So there began to be people who wanted to become photographers and make it art, which is what we have now. So this one here, the eloquent eye. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Zoom was acting really weird this morning. So the eloquent eye is pretty long documentary of Alfred Stieglitz. He's one of the great early art photographers. He's pretty cool, but I can't show it all here. But that's like a full story of him. He's one of the first who did this, and he's one of the first who said, we're going to make this an art form. And he got immediate backlash, like from painters.
Wow, really?
Yeah, they're like, that's not art because you're using a box, a mechanical device to get the image.
Yeah, I could see where they would be coming with that, but that's just crazy to think that that's what they thought of at first.
But it's kind of not surprising because it's new. And that happened actually more recently with like installation art, with video art, the more traditional painters. It's always the painters.
Yeah, I've heard some people say that they don't consider like digital art real
Yes.
art because you're using the programs and the
Yep.
computer and stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
similar type of thing, I guess.
Yep, that's a great example. Yeah, so it's still happening today. And this one is kind of a cool history. It starts in the very beginning, like the 1826. And in those days, they would set a camera, what was their first camera, on the first image was a camera set up in a window that overlooked rooftops. And the exposure time at that time was like 20 minutes. So they would just click and then they come back and unclick it around 20 minutes later because it took that long to make the image
Crazy.
because of the chemicals and stuff. So it's kind of funny, but it kind of brings you through. And the same one with this early years. So anyway, take a look at those if you haven't already. This week is one of my favorite weeks, including the architecture. Do you have your book there?
I have, let me see, I've got the digital copy.
So that you're looking at the same things I am. And then, okay. But this is the start also of modern architecture, since this is a class on modern art. Let's see, here it is. Very interesting how architecture started changing dramatically. You know, the old Victorian type homes, and they super decorative. They had decorations, carving on the outside. They had rooms that were I mean, we still, I don't know if you've heard this, but there's a thing called open concept now. Everyone wants open, like the kitchen can see into the living room kind of thing. And that was a new thing in these days. But the most important one was a couple of them. One was called the Bauhaus, Bauhaus, and it's on page, where they cover that is on page 237. Oh, sorry, that's not it. We might as well look at 236. On 236 is one of the first American modern architects. I tell you, these guys, anytime you start something new, the person who starts it is just almost vilified. It's just amazing. And then he got a divorce. He was Catholic. He had like 5 kids and a wife. This is out of Chicago. And he got a divorce and he lost clients just because of that. So that talks about the times. This was back in the 30s when he started. And he left the more traditional architecture firm and started on his own. Okay, it's 229 is, you'll see a picture of the Bauhaus, and I think I can get it up here.
Okay, I'm having a little bit of trouble with my digital book, but I'm trying to get it to work right now.
Oh, you've got a digital book? Is that an iPad? Let's see. Oh, Bauhaus is next week. I usually have it with the German Expressionism, so let's just hold on that. You can still look at it. It looks like the major part of this is next week.
Okay.
But I'm still saying to read chapter 14. What's for chapter? Yeah, okay. This is a fairly new course. So I teach a survey course also. So to make this one, I had to import a whole bunch of the stuff from the modern part of that course. And so there's parts here where I didn't get it right. So this is where I can find out how it needs to be tweaked. Okay,
Gotcha.
so we'll go into the chapter 22. Are you getting there?
No, it's still giving me some problems.
Oh, what's it doing?
Well, so I had one that I had found online, and now it's like saying that I don't have it, and it's like refusing to load.
Oh no.
Yeah,
Do you
I
only
don't
get
know
it
if
for a time period? Isn't it through the quarter?
thought so, but yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out right now.
Oh, that's a real problem because then you can't do the reading.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the reading the last couple of weeks. It was really helpful.
Is it saying you don't have access?
Yeah.
Oh, I you're gonna so somewhere online, you're gonna have to go back into where you got it. Did you pay for it?
No, I thought I had found it for free, and that's the thing. So maybe it wasn't what I thought it was.
Yeah, I'd go back in and look because you're gonna get stuck halfway through here. We're only in week 4, so if you can get that fixed this week, that would probably catch you up.
Okay.
The thing is the quizzes are all based on the book. That's the real problem here. So
Yeah, that would be a problem.
yeah, and the essay you can do by looking at other stuff, but online that I have. Okay, so chapter 22 is the early 20th century, and the first one is one of my very favorites, the Fauves, and Fauve means wild beast. This is where Matisse comes in, and then the same chapter has uh, there's a bunch of different, like German Expressionism, which is also, I just love it because it's during the war. We're looking at a period of time where World War I is in full swing. And what are the artists doing at that time? Well, a lot of them were fighting the war. They were in there, you just went. There wasn't even a draft, you just went. They still signed you up, but there was no choice. So it's weird. All of a sudden, you have German artists who were friends with French artists, and all of a sudden they're fighting on different sides of the war. Really
That's
weird.
terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible anyway. Um, and then the same chapter has Cubism, which is Picasso, and then a really cool sculptor called Brancusi, who's and then the architect Frank Lloyd Wright. He's the one I was talking about. So he's amazing. It looks like the Bauhaus we're looking at next week. So we're looking at part of this. So let me go back here, 22. Okay. So, and then a more modern painter, by the way, Alfred Stieglitz, who I just mentioned down here, The Eloquent Eye, there's always stories, you're going to start seeing now artists who are become a couple, and they've got really interesting stories. Like he was married, he was a lot older, and he ended up with Georgia O'Keeffe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he was like 40 and she was like 19, and he had a studio already in New York. And he had a magazine because he was promoting photography and getting other photographers who wanted to do art photography to make them artwork. And so he had the studio, and so he was helping other fledgling photographers to become artists, recognized as artists. And then Georgia O'Keeffe, he found somebody, a friend of hers, gave him some of her drawings that were very abstract of like, she was in Texas at the time, teaching at a school, and she'd go out in the prairie because there was nothing to do in this small town. And she was doing like pods of wheat and stuff, but like, and this is what she's known for, taking flowers and just blowing up one section of it, which was also really non-traditional. He took those drawings, he put them in his gallery and showed them. And when she came back to New York, she was furious with him. And you would think the opposite, like, oh my gosh, my work is being shown.
Yeah.
She was furious because she was a super independent person, and they were just drawings that she was just fooling around with. And she was furious because they were in front of a whole bunch of really important people. So
Yeah, I guess I can understand that.
Yeah, he was always in trouble with her. So let's go back to the Fauves. I like this because there was a complete shift. We have the Impressionists, who everyone now knows is a pretty standard, real pretty paintings of people on the outdoors and stuff. They were the first ones who started painting outside, called plein air. So it's outside. And he started to do, and I'll get a PDF here and go through this way you can look at them. Henri Matisse, and you're going to learn the correct expression, so it's not Henry. And the idea of expressionism, so now they're talking about expressing themselves. I think your first assignment was to define, it was about defining art, and that was one of the things in the definition that I gave you. Let's open this up. There we go. I am having what? I can't believe I have a reader. Continue with Google. This has not been happening, and then all of a sudden it's happening. I can't even open a PDF. I'll just continue with Google because it's just easier. Signing with your browser. Let's see, Google is, you have to have all your passwords. Here's mine. And hope this works. I'm having trouble. Amazon's kind of changing their thing and just confusing everybody. This has never happened before.
That's pretty annoying.
Yeah, it really is. I don't even know if they have this phone number. Oh, I can tell you, this is crazy. Okay, if this doesn't work, I'm moving on. 558-387. Close this browser. Okay, nope. Okay, it must be on the, here it is, on the desktop. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna do, let's see. I'm not gonna worry about that. Okay, so there's the thing, wild beasts, and we now have also critics, art critics. Some of them were some of the great writers, novelists, writing articles for, they were doing critiques of artwork. Some of them were friends of theirs, but there were plenty who weren't. So this guy, and Camille can be a male name. Even though to us Americans looks like a female. This is a guy. A pot of paint has been flung in the face of the public. That was his little take on this. So Les Fauves. So here's what is going on here and what's so new. Uncharacteristic, unexpected colors. This is about releasing the artist's inner vision, feelings, expressing feelings. from the viewer. This is when they started thinking about what is the viewer thinking. And not all artists did that. Not all artists cared, but some of them were thinking about that interaction as a viewer looked at their work. Normally, more modern people didn't care. And I think that's a lot of even today. Unless it's a social issue, something political, then they do care. But a lot of them said, I'm doing the work, I'm done with it. I've showed as a painter myself years ago. I didn't care. In fact, by the time you show something, it's like a year old and it's like you don't even want to talk about it. So, and a distortion of images, violent brushstrokes. This is André Delaine, and he was a friend of Matisse. They painted each other and they did self-portraits. So André did one of Matisse. I love this painting. And Matisse did one of André. So you can see what's going on here. They call violent brushstrokes, and that's what this is. Look at the background. It's just some of these guys were using really large brushes and their hands and sometimes rags. He's got his little HM down here. That's not normally how he signed his paintings. But you see here what's going on too, and this is a better example. Same background. Like there's nothing in the background. It's not even a wall. So the important thing here, and it's why I love these painters, and there were female ones too, it's the expression of the eyes particularly. If you can nail the mood through the eyes, I mean, this is sort of a pensive look, and he captured it. But look at this. Normally for the shade side, the value would be dark, but it would be a dark version of this. And they weren't doing that. They were showing an extreme dark, and it still looks normal to us, but not at this time. Similar to the Impressionists and how they were treated, just shocked at what they were looking at. And so these guys weren't selling originally. They were really poor. Matisse ended up being really wealthy once his work took off. So these are 1905. This is right before World War I. He said his work was a rapid rendering of a landscape. A rapid rendering of a landscape represents only one moment of its existence because they're doing it really fast. I prefer, by insisting upon its essential character, to risk losing charm in order to obtain greater stability. So he's talking about the charm of the Impressionists and how actually representational their work looked, even though it was considered messy by the people at the time. So this is like almost 50 years after the Impressionists and about 20 years after the Post-Impressionists. And they're talking and they're writing. So here's early work of his, and there's a great documentary. Take a rainy day and just watch it. It shows his whole life, and you get a real sense of who he was. He started painting in Paris, and he was copying other people's work. This is like George Seurat, which you looked at last week, the guy that did pointillism. And copying is not considered copying. I've done it myself. When you're learning in an art school to paint, a lot of times they encourage you to paint, copy like Da Vinci or a modern painter to learn how to do that. And so he was doing that. It's very common. Here's another one. So you can see here, I mean, it's beautiful to me because it's so expressionistic. It was done very quickly. And, he's got some green in the water that you wouldn't expect. He's got a green sky. I have granddaughters who are only like 11, and when they were a little bit younger, they would paint, and they didn't care. They had red skies and yellow skies, and it's kind of wrong to tell a child how to paint. This is more childlike, not worrying about that. So here's Matisse's work. So you can see how shocking this is. This has actually got another title to it. It's his wife. The public called it the green stripe, and which is kind of a nasty, thing, but same kind of background, purple, orange, green. He loved color almost as much as Van Gogh did. but you can see very large brush strokes. These are kind, not that you're allowed to do this, but you could run your hand over that and it would have texture in it. But he captured her eyes, her mood. This is another one. It's not a great resolution. This one's actually in Russia. He got one of his first clients who was roaming through Europe buying new artists' work. He was an industrialist from Russia. He had a ton of money and he loved this work. So he's got in the Hermitage, which used to be a palace for the Tsar, he's got probably 30 of Matisse's paintings. So he would come down. He even did a mural in his home, his mansion. And so he started making money. He could charge this guy, and he was making really good money now. He rented a house outside of Paris by a river, and eventually he had enough money to buy that house, and he lived there the rest of his life. So here we go. I mean, barely see this line that is the line between the table and the wall. And that and the same design just went right up here. They were completely free on how they painted. Here's what he started to become famous for. This is called The Joy of Life. And all he's showing here is the kinds of activities that give human beings joy. And he's got things that shock people, like here's more sexual kind of stuff. But dancing, this is a big theme of his, dancing and music, friendship. Here's another view, the outdoors and stuff. But look at this, just completely chaotic. Purple in the background and pink trees. This is one of his most famous. Later on in his 60s, he got bowel cancer and he was laid up for quite a long time. He was also starting to lose his eyesight. So he had an assistant, a young woman, and he started to have her just paint pieces of paper, thick paper, and in different colors. And he started with these massive scissors you'll see in the really good documentary of him. And they actually have the guy who's doing the documentary go to Matisse's last house in the south of France. And there's a artist in residence there. And she said, let's see if we could do the cutout here. And he did it. And it showed how difficult what this was. The guy, after he finished, he said it looked like roadkill. It was he couldn't quite get the dimensions here, but it's use of primary colors, which you've probably learned in the first week: yellow, blue, and red. This is Icarus, that Greek story about this Icarus who flew too close to the sun and he died and he fell. So, but he's got his heart here. There's a tilt of his head, which shows despair. He's trying not to fall. And this is starting to happen here too, is significant, that painting off the canvas, which people normally didn't do. It's a really strong. Then here's one of my favorites, and I think it's my favorite because these German painters and printmakers, etchings and things, this is expressing the time in which they lived, which was World War I. A lot of them started right before, like 1913, and then once the war got started, some of them got wounded. There's one you'll see here who came back and because he was wounded, he came back and he started painting really not creepy, but really strong, disturbing kinds of work. And you'll see what I mean here. This is one of the most famous German expressionists, Kirchner, self-portrait, 1915, right after the war started. And he came back from being wounded. He wasn't wounded in this matter. He's talking about a universal kind of idea about soldiers being wounded. And he's showing a painting here. He's got a model, but look at this awful color. It's kind of a queasy looking yellow, almost like jaundice look. And it's creepy. But the time, you always have to, from now on, modern art is about you know, representing the time that's around you, the environment and the time period. So this was in Dresden, and World War II, actually, Dresden got obliterated by us and the English, but not during this time. Let's see. Violent brushstrokes again. These are so cool. He is making huge statements about war. That's another thing he did. He comes back, he's wounded, he's seeing a lot of death and carnage on the battlefield. He comes back and he has very strong feelings about the industrialists, who are the ones who, who are making a ton of money. And that in every war goes on. There's always people who are making the armaments and they make a lot of money. And his problem was that you're making money almost to continue the war. I mean, this wasn't Nazism. This was like the Kaiser and England and France. And during that time, Queen Victoria, all her kids ended up being having some kind of like the Kaiser was related to the English Queen. So it's really bizarre that they started a war and were fighting each other almost like cousins. Pretty sick. So 1914, again, he's showing these really wealthy women and he's making them extremely scary, almost unattractive. Look at these sharp, really awful people. That's what he's saying. This is interesting because the composition here has got this sort of, you know, swerve to it like this. These pretty colors, but he's showing really awful, what he considers as really awful people. And that's right before the war. So they're walking around in their, you know, their fancy clothes. This is another guy that we actually looked at last week. Let me see, I'm going to get him up here.
Scream, right?
Yes, here. I just wanted to read, and this is the guy, but he was painting a little bit before, but he was around during the war too. I missed this last week. This is what he said, Munch actually said about this, his experience. He said, I was walking along the road with two friends. The sun, which he capitalized, was setting. The sky turned a bloody red, and I felt a whiff of melancholy, which is also capitalized. I stood still, deathly tired, over the blue-black fjord. Do you know what a fjord is?
Yeah.
Yeah. And city hung blood and tongues of fire. My friends walked on. I remained behind, shivering with anxiety. I felt the great scream in nature. Both those words are capitalized. He was, I can't believe he lived as long as he did, but he was depressed most of his life. And this sort of reflects that. He felt such anxiety. This is how he described what he was feeling and what he felt like the world was. Even in 1892, there were a lot of civil wars, even in Paris, a little bit before that. And I was talking last week about he did 5 versions of the Scream. Most people don't know this. And some of them were pastels done on paper. And one of them was, I think one of them at least was an oil painting. And so he did multiples of this. And I think it's because he just kept wanting to do it over and over again. So I really like this guy. I'm a big part of my DNA is Norwegian, Scandinavian. And I was actually there in the late 70s. And I got to go to the Munch Museum because I already was aware of him. And it's funny because these people look really depressed and it's strange, and it's also very, very dark. They have in the summer they have only 1 hour of darkness. It's about 11 o'clock to midnight, and all of a sudden you get dusk, and then dark, and then about midnight, 12:30, the sun comes out. It's very strange to experience that. In the winter, it's the reverse. You literally have maybe 3 or 4 hours of light and the rest is dark. So, but my experience with the Norwegians was they were so sweet and their language almost sounds sing-song. They always lilt at the end of it. So that's kind of my take on that. I like this guy. And here's Kirchner again doing the Brandenburg Gate. This is a super famous structure in Berlin. It's one of the entrances and exits of the city. And again, here's also blue, yellow predominantly, and red. So primary colors are really effective. That's the gate itself. It's still there. This is a printmaker, a woman who, it says here, her son died during the first week of World War I. So she obviously was very affected by that. Printmaking is multiples, either lithographs or etchings. And it's called The Survivors. Her work was mostly about the collateral damage of war. And notice this is after the war was over. Probably, I think that was over in 1918 or 19. And she's still making work like that because there's still small wars going on. And it's pretty awful. I mean, you don't even see eyes, they're just sockets, dark ones. This is her most famous one, The Death of a Child. And it's pretty heartbreaking, and it's very expressionistic. 1903, so before. Another one, this looks like a woodcut, is a memorial of one of the not radicals or anarchists, but somebody who was resistant to the war. This is also really amazing. The grieving parents, and this is 1932. This is actually right before Hitler. He won his chancellorship in 1934. So this is already, and those years in between, there was a lot of this severe right wing stuff going on that led to Hitler. She is showing in a really amazing way. I don't know if you know much about Germans, but they have sort of, the English in their, they call stiff upper lip, like they do not show emotions. The Germans are even more so.
I have heard that, yeah.
Yeah. Germans are more so. They're known for that, and I doubt that that's true today. She's showing a father who is so grieving. He is literally gripping his body and his face. He is not going to show any emotion, but he's lost a child. Whereas she's depicting a mother as being bent over. She can't even stand. So, and neither of them are standing. Kandinsky, he's in this chapter too. His big thing was to show music in a two-dimensional form, which is pretty cool. And there was modern music starting too that was very different. What some people thought was abrupt. Here's one that's sort of representational, Franz Marc, 1913, but it's showing the kind of the beginnings. Picasso was already doing Cubism, so it's showing the sort of the influence of that. Fighting Forms, 1914, the war, black and red, however you want to. And here's one of a soldier, and he took his uniform and painted all the important parts of the uniform. Pretty amazing. This one's a really famous painting. It's still around, and I believe one of these is one that was there's still, the Germans took it. They raided a whole bunch of artwork, and there's the families who were booted out of their homes. This is more getting close to World War II, and they're still fighting. I think some of them have won to get these things back in the family because their family owned it. Okay, move on. Cubism. So there's a really great, let me see, go back to modules. Documentaries that I found, I still use them. This young guy who writes about art, he does them, and I like him because he's very, he's funny. He treats art with respect, but he really shows the whole story with all of them. So, and the series is called Modern Masters. The first one is Matisse. The second one is, it should be, yeah, here's the one of Picasso. They're just amazing. And I just love the way he talks, and he walks around, he goes to their homes. With Picasso, he showed, he went to the place where his great only depiction of war painting in black and white called Guernica, and it was about the, should go, it will be in here somewhere. Let's see. Guernica is a town in Spain. He's from Spain. He's Spanish. And he depicted the brutality of war. So you can really see this is a really big theme, that artists are always interested in telling the truth about what's going on. That's one of the reasons I like it so much. Let me see if this goes without being some weird thing with, oh, this is not Adobe, this is a PowerPoint rather than a PDF. So Picasso comes on the scene. What I was saying is Guernica was, I think, 1939, and Hitler decided, it was his birthday, I think it's April 20th. He decided to go test his planes, his bombers, on this small town to see how they worked, and they
Jeez.
crap out of this town. I mean, it's so awful. He just obliterated it. Very few people made it out, but he thought it was, he was very pleased with the outcome. I kind of liken it to 9/11 with the guys who did that. And then I heard that bin Laden was just thrilled with how successful they were. Damn, I'm not going to use that.
This was terrible.
Yeah. It's humankind. So Cézanne, who came a little bit earlier, oh, this is doing what I'm saying. That's okay, because I'm recording it. It said Suzanne instead of Cézanne. Everything in nature, I'm going to move your box over here. It takes its form from three things: a sphere, a cone shape, and cylinder. And that's where Cubism sort of starts here. Old notions of matter, time, and space are shattered. Cézanne cracked the glass, but Picasso shattered it. It's a really good way of showing that. So the first truly abstract work was Cubist. It lacks the normal elements that you study. It was fragmented. It was painted very flat on the surface. Disregarded physical laws, no traditional perspective. You studied that too, where everything is correctly in perspective. They didn't care about this. It was very flat and it's modern, so a whole different way of looking at what they were doing. I believe that part of this change is from the world and what was going on at the time. There was the insanity of those two wars, and people felt sort of lost, and all their traditional values were gone. There's so much death. So no traditional perspective. Value, which is the darks and lights, not used to convey depth anymore. Jagged planes of color, more than one location in space. And here's the two kinds you'll be looking at. This is actually on your quiz, so giving you a heads up. Analytical, which is one type, and synthetic, which is a different type. So here's a Cézanne. You can see where Cubism is starting, and they all knew each other. So he was older than Picasso. He was a younger painter, and they were hanging out together, and they revered this guy because they felt like he was way ahead of his time, and they just kind of followed his lead. Let's see. They saw Braque's work, houses at Lestat, and mocked it. Everything is broken down into cubes. I don't think that's actually strong. And then the influence for Cubism, because Picasso knew all the post-impressionists, was post-impressionism and impressionist. That influenced George Braque, who was the one who worked with Picasso. And African influence, you'll see. The masks particularly, which were very simplistic and primitive. and a direct reaction to Fauvism. So here's break away from the technique and concentrate on color, no longer interested in that, and disengages with detail. There's a really good example. Picasso was in a museum. He was in Paris now, and he was in a natural history museum type thing. And he saw these African masks, and his work began to show the characteristics of this. Super simple. This slits for eyes, earth tones. Here's, you can see how this was really shocking the public too. 1881, 1973 is, he was, I think, 93 when he died. Spanish, like I said. So this is showing no perspective, not caring about the outline of the, of the head. His nose is large. It does look like him. He had very deep, what is this happening? Dark, almost black eyes. He was a Spaniard. And kind of like the Fauves, where it was very quickly done, but he had real reasons for doing this. This is his most famous painting. I'm giving you a chance in the essay this week to write about either Matisse or Picasso. And one of the things you have to talk about Picasso is this painting. This was his breakthrough. He and another guy, George Brock, literally holed up in their studios for 3 months, doing these new kinds of painting. This one has a whole history of its own. There used to be another figure here. It's also very strange in those days to do a square painting. Here's the masks. And he's showing, I mean, they're females. People had a real problem with this. They were also from a brothel, which Picasso was well versed in, very familiar with. He visited them himself. And he knew this. And besides that, a lot of their models were prostitutes because they would work for, cheap. So they, an artist starting out in Paris in those days was pretty poor. This is 1907. Demoiselles d'Avignon means the ladies of Avignon, and Avignon was a street near where he lived that had all the bordellos there. So it's pretty amazing, and it's showing a lack of perspective, not much, just kind of a pastel color. Flatter, the analytical cubism is flat, which you just kind of saw. He wasn't concerned about showing something in a three-dimensional with the regular dark, medium, and light. Monochromatic. They call it analytical for a reason. It was design, not really expressionistic. Structure, not color. So these are his pieces. They look like sculptures almost, but he calls it Three Women. Here's a really good example. There's an example of this one in the documentary by a current sculptor in England. And he did a sculptural with rusted steel, I think it was, small version of this that was pretty cool. And he talks about it. He talks about, he almost came into tears because he knew Picasso, and he said this was, he just admired him so much, and so he used his work to make sculptures. So this is analytical too, and you could barely, and it gets more and more so where you can't determine what it is. Here's another one. It's called the mandora. So here's a musical instrument. You can kind of see the man. So you can see they're using shapes that are odd to actually show something. This is even more difficult. When I taught in class, I could really go through, and it was large on the screen, so it was more impactful. Then synthetic, he started using color and materials. Like he would, they'd pick up newspaper, glue them on, kind of like collaging, and nobody was doing that at the time. And just be aware of the dates that these are happening in. So this is with things, there's a newspaper there. Sometimes they would paint the newspaper, sometimes they would just stick them on there. Here's a piece of a chair. This is Georges Braque, and he was another painter, and he worked, they were doing the same kind of thing, but Picasso became famous, Braque did not, because Picasso was, he knew how to market himself, and he became famous because of that. And these are the things that they influenced. So, okay, a little bit after 1. Do you have a class coming up?
I have one that starts about 2:30.
Okay. Well, I'll be wrapping up here anyway. Let's see. I don't need to save that. Guess I better save it. Okay, the rest of it is, let's see, Cubism. There's one called, there's some other ones here with different names to it that I'm not really covering. There's Picasso. I saw a huge in Seattle Art Museum years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago, of Picasso's work. And it was chronological. So when you walk in there, it was one of his first paintings, and they got almost 150 pieces of his work, including his sculptures that he did in cardboard and steel. He did everything. He did ceramics, he did printmaking. He was just really busy every day.
That's crazy. I had no idea that he did that many different things and that he even had that many total works.
Yeah,
I had no idea. Yeah.
I mean, that was just he worked for like 70 years, so he had
Wow.
way more than that. I mean, he just, you know, when he died, his wife at the time was left with cataloging all that stuff. And it took her years, and she died 12 years after him. She committed suicide. I think once she finished everything, she had a hard time living without him. So,
Man.
poor thing.
Yeah.
She also was the guard. She was the one who decided which journalists, writers, photographers got to him, got to see him. So this is the modern masters. I just really okay. So also, I don't think I have anything. Maybe it's here. No, it's not. It shouldn't be there. I'm going to see if I've got that. There's a thing on Brancusi, which is pretty amazing. His sculptures were just incredibly beautiful, but super modern. I'm looking at them now. They're on page 404, just so you know.
Okay.
The same. Actually, let's see if there's one here. I should have put that in there. Modern. Post. Modernism, Impressionism. Should be with Cubism. Here he is. So I can show you. He's Italian. Actually, he was more like a Romanian, Eastern Europe. And he started doing things that were about as simplistic as you could get. Here's what he was doing. Here's one called The Prayer, which is semi-representational. You can see what it is. This is a face. I've seen these in person. Looking at this, you just wonder, will it, you know, if you touch it, would it like move?
Yeah. Is it like lightweight and it would wobble, or is it like adhered to that surface, or what?
It's not adhered to the surface. So,
Okay.
and I'm not sure, it could be brass. That's my guess.
Yeah,
And
that's what it looked like to me.
yeah, this is really famous, called The Kiss. It's just, you know, it just annoyed people so much at the time. I mean, he's showing the absolute simplistic elements of love. So, you know, when you're in love with somebody, you literally are encasing them with your arm and your personality. And kissing. I mean, you're like glued to each other, and that's real typical of that. And he's got several, he's got a really large version of this. It might be in this one. Here's some paintings in the background. These are his most famous pieces. This is a bird, Maestra, 1910, 1911. This is also, I've seen these in person. He did this in many forms. He did it in brass, and this is marble. So he sculpted this out of marble. And it's called Bird in Space. So he's actually showing a movement of a bird, either perched or starting to fly. And this is really hard for people to understand. So here's an example. This might be where I was if it's in New York. There was a whole room full of his stuff in the Museum of Modern Art. Have you ever been to New York?
I have, yeah.
Well, have you been to the MoMA?
No, I didn't get a chance to get there.
Yeah, well, if you go back, that's where it would all be. Golden Bird, this is from me, and it concentrates on explaining that. Table of Silence is very sad. He's depicting the death in World War I. It's a table and chairs, and there's no one there. So when you know things like that, it's really sad. Endless Column. This is a recreation in an even more simplistic elemental form of the kiss, gate of the kiss. There's another example of it. This is a woman he knew who was actually a benefactor of him. She was helping to support him. She was a really wealthy woman and almost looks bird-like. But to appreciate modern art, you have to go beyond what you want to see. This one is called The Cry. It's a child's head with mouth open, and they're of infants. The most elemental human thing, the first thing we do when we're born is cry. His drawings, this was in MoMA, I believe, also. Yeah, looks like it. Bronze, he was, you can see this. It's to some people it's creepy, but it shows. This is the most famous one, Newborn. And when I was in a classroom, I used to teach on the base. I would ask people, can you see what this is? And if it's a newborn, it's called that, so you know. And they had two different ways of looking at it. One was that this was the head and the swaddling. Do you have children?
I don't know.
So when you have a newborn, the thing now is to swaddle them pretty tightly when they're babies. And they like being enclosed because they just came out of the uterus in very enclosed space. And they're not used to that. So people figured out not that long ago, a couple decades ago, to swaddle them, and it makes them more secure and sleep better. The other one is, I wouldn't even call it a cry, it's a scream. So kind of they wouldn't have teeth, and the head, it's pretty intense. Here's just a regular one of a bust, but he kind of went all modern everybody. So, but his work eventually took off. And I think next week, let's see, futurism. Okay. Next week is going to be a thing called Dada, which is another very interesting period of what artists were doing that threw everything out the window. Again, during World War I and after. So we'll look at that next week. And then we'll start getting into 23 covers quite a bit too, and the newly emerging American artists who eventually took over. I like to say that art, the periods of art, when you do a survey course, which I have, the period of art goes from the Middle East to Greek, where you have the Greek statues, and then it goes to Italy. So I'm talking about the dominant places where things are happening. Then it went to Paris, and then it went to the United States, to New York. And New York dominated over Europe for a long time. And it's kind of cool. When I was studying art, I never really thought much of American artists because I was always into the Europeans. And my gosh, what we did was just mind blowing. So you'll see that coming up. Okay, I think that's it. Let me just look at this. Do you think you're more interested in writing on Matisse or Picasso, or do you know yet?
I'm not sure. I was just trying to think about that.
Yeah.
I'll have to look into each of them a little more. Obviously, I know about Picasso a lot more just because his name is so popular, but I'll have to
Yeah.
look into more of his stuff and then Matisse as well and kind of see which one is
Okay.
calling out to me.
Yeah, and you can see here I've loaded, so I would I kind of want you to see this, especially his. These are, looks like this is from the same series. It's not saying that, but this will bring you to the Matisse one. It will really help you to write the essay. This one I'm concentrating on Demoiselle d'Avignon. And then just answer the paintings. You're kind of familiar with what I do now with essays and where his influence came from and why it was a breakthrough painting. And this is about the questions here are about Matisse. You could, how does this show in this painting? Anyway, I'm going to check on this too. See if it actually goes.
If you're a homeowner in Washington and you're still paying for electricity,
Looks like it's,
then I've got some big news for you.
they all seem to have this now.
Yeah, it's at the beginning of every video,
First
seems like.
What's that?
Those ads seem like they're at the beginning of every video now. It's so
They
annoying.
are, yeah. At least some of them have skip where you can skip them after 5 seconds.
Yeah.
They're depending on that you already saw it with your
Yeah.
brain. Yeah. Okay, Brandon, I think that's it. I recorded this, so I'm gonna load it for everybody else. And we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds good.
What other classes are you taking?
So the one that I've got coming up here is like a Java programming class.
Oh, really?
That's like the main thing that I'm going into, but this class looks like it was going to be a lot of fun, and I needed one more to fill out my term. So I was like, oh, I'll see if the VA will pay for this one, and they did. So
They do,
yeah, I
yeah.
was pretty happy about that. And then my other one is a world history, which is or
Nice.
world civilization history, which is actually it's kind of cool and confusing at the same time because we're talking about the Renaissance a lot, and then in this class we're talking about Renaissance art, and I was like, wait, I already read that, and I was like, oh wait, that was the other class, and so
Yeah,
for a second there, it was like learning
yeah.
almost the same thing in both. It was really cool.
So have you taken my other class?
No, I haven't.
Okay, because that's the one where I do the Renaissance, the survey course from prehistoric to current times.
Oh, okay, that sounds cool.
This one just concentrates on this section, which is one of my favorite things. So, so that sounds pretty interesting. Is the history class, world history, is that in 2 parts? Sometimes I'll do 1 and 2. Or is it the whole
Yes.
thing?
So, oh, sorry, clicked out of the window and it remuted me. This class is Civ 2, I believe. I took the first one years ago. I'm just returning now to kind of finish out my AA and then transfer.
Oh, okay.
So I took World Civ 1 back in, gosh, I don't know. It either would have been like 2006-ish, 5-ish.
Okay.
Or it could have been because that was the first time I tried college, or it could have been the second time, which was after I got out of the military, and that was 2011, 2012-ish.
Okay.
One of those times I took the first one,
Okay.
and so I was able to take the second one this time since I'd passed the first time. But it's obviously been quite a lot of time
So
in between.
where do you start with the second one?
Let me see here. We started with basically the Renaissance. It seems
Okay.
like it's mostly the Renaissance. We're talking about
Okay.
that. We're talking about the Reformation. Now we're kind of this past week, we were into like the Age of Exploration and stuff like that. So starting with the Renaissance up until, gosh, I think they said like
Today?
I don't think it gets to modern times. I think it was like 17 or 1800. I can't
Oh,
recall off the top of my head, but
I wonder
it's a really
why.
cool class. Yeah.
I wonder why it doesn't go further. Maybe it's just about defining civilization.
Maybe I don't. It could go further, and I'm just
Yeah.
misremembering. My memory is not what it used to be. So,
Who's
but
teaching that? Who's teaching that class?
that one is. Let me pull it up real quick.
I don't think it's the same person who used to teach it.
This is Lieber Gottberg. I can't recall her first name.
Yeah, I don't go to faculty meetings anymore. There used to be a whole group of us who were really close, and a whole bunch of those people are retired. And Willie Jackson was one of the best. He taught that. He also taught a class on Vietnam,
Oh,
the
that'd be cool.
war. Yeah, he was amazing, and he's pretty old now, so he retired. But man, he was good. I was sad to see him go. But you know, they always hire good people, so I'm sure she's good. I just don't know any of them anymore. So, and I taught on base. So you're in the military? You were?
So I'm taking this class like purely online. I'm living in Kirkland. I'm taking most of
Oh,
my classes through the Puyallup campus just because that's
okay.
where I did a lot of it.
Yeah.
But because this one was all online, they routed me through JBLM.
Oh, okay.
So I was in the Marines, so I wasn't ever stationed at JBLM. I didn't ever
Oh,
work there or anything. I've been on base over there, but
yeah.
it's just funny that I happen to be former military, and then it put me into this course with I was reading like the syllabus and stuff, and it was talking about like, oh, if you are on training or if you get deployed or all this stuff, and I was like, oh, that's kind of crazy. Like I'm not
Yeah.
supposed to be going through that, but I kind of got put over there.
Well, it's because you have the VA benefits and what's I forgot the
That GI Bill.
yeah, the GI Bill. So
Yeah,
that's
I
what
guess
you're
that makes
going
sense.
for?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And where are you going to transfer to after you're done here?
The plan is UW Bothell.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's real close, and UW seems like a really great school. They've got really good like coding programs and stuff. And where
So
I'm at up in Kirkland, it's pretty
what do you
close.
want to do for a living then? For job?
I I'm just kind of starting to get into coding. I've always thought that it would be too complicated for me to learn, and it is very complicated. But I'm picking up more of it than I thought I would. But
Okay.
my brother and my dad both are really into computer stuff and like coding and stuff. So I figured
Really?
I could figure it out.
Wow.
But I've always been I've played video games my entire life, and so I was kind of like, what if I kind of learned how to make a little game
Yeah.
myself or something like that? So that's
Yeah. And you did?
I haven't made any games yet, but that's I've got like some stuff planned out, but I'm still learning the basics of like all the coding and stuff. So I'm
Oh,
working my
okay.
way up there, but I'm gonna see if that's where I can go.
Yeah. Well, aren't the jobs there too?
Yeah, a lot of coding jobs, a lot of coding jobs out there, so that's really good.
Except that some of the like Google and face Facebook are laying people off like
Yeah,
crazy
I just heard
amounts.
that actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew a guy, one of my best friends' daughters married to this guy who they moved from Dallas last year. He got hired by Facebook and they wanted him in Seattle, so they moved up here and then he got laid off.
Wow, that's terrible. Like right after he just moved up here.
Yeah,
That's really bad.
yeah. I don't happen to like him, so I wasn't too sad about it, but you know,
Yeah, it still sucks, but yeah.
but he was, I don't know, he's still not employed. They moved back and she's getting a job now, so and they just had a baby, so it's pretty weird. Yeah,
That's
you know, I
terrible
always
timing.
thought, why, instead of laying people off, why don't you just reduce their hours or somehow keep them on? I don't understand. It's not like they don't have a lot of money.
It's got to just be greed. Everything in the world that's going to hell in a handbasket that's
Yep,
doesn't make sense. It's usually because of greed
yep,
and the
yeah, I agree.
shareholders and the board and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
it disgusts me, but it's what the world is.
Yeah, me too. It is really awful from what, I mean, I'm 70 and I've just seen so much in my lifetime and it's just so upsetting that this is what's going on. There's always been layoffs, but not like this. And
Yeah,
not with the three biggest billionaire companies that it's, I think it's kind of unconscionable.
yeah. It's hopefully something changes soon sometimes, but I've been saying that
Yeah,
for a while and it hasn't been. So
I guess
hopefully
it would
it's
take it's usually, it used to be that the workers would change it, like unions, and they'd force companies to start behaving better, but the unions are less than they used to be, so.
yeah,
But
unfortunately.
anyway, well, it's good to know you, to get to know you better. That's why I like doing these.
Yeah, it was good to chat. It was really
Okay,
good.
we'll have a good rest of the day with your class.
Thank you. You as well. I'll see you next time.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Stop share. And recording.